Welcome again everyone to my channel. This is a chemistry paper 2 question from AQA, and this question will focus on the rate of reactions looking on sodium thiosulfate and diluted hydrochloric acid. Please, as you go through the video, as usual, pause and check that you understand the question before you continue. Enjoy and all the best. So the first part of the question I really look at the practical component where the sodium thiosulfate and diluted hydrochloric acid both mix together. You have the X underneath the conical flask, and this is a practical that you should have completed. The question AQ is asking you, they've given some key information to focus on. You see what it says, precipitate, and it asks which makes the mixture goes cloudy. Now I put here that the reason why it goes cloudy is because a solid is formed. Now if you notice from the equation down here, you need to look through the equation and see which of these substance or which of these properties within this equation is a solid based on what we call these little state here. And you can see here that the sulfur is what caused it to go cloudy. So that is something that you need to focus on. So on the next part of the question, now look at the effect of changing temperature. This is something you need to be mindful of. AQA can sometimes ask you about different things within the question itself, and your job is to understand what am I being asked here. So if you're changing the temperature, you know that temperature in this scenario would be the independent variable because that's what you're changing. So therefore, AQA then asks to describe the trend in the result. If you look at the graph, you can see that one thing to bear in mind, the temperature. Look, if you look at the temperature, it is increasing. What do you note about the relative rate of the reaction? It is also increasing. So therefore, a key thing to bear in mind and to pay attention to when AQA asks about trend, look at the relationship. You're looking at temperature against the rate of reaction, and you will now make a judgment. How are these two things affecting each other? The next thing to bear in mind is what AQA wants you to do is to ensure that you had some data. So there has to be some data in your answer. So for example, when the temperature was 50, what was it on the rate of reaction? So you need to include some data in your answer to ensure that you are getting the maximum mark. The answer is on the screen, but I did not put the data there. So please make sure you pause and check for yourself so you can add your own answer as you go through. So again, you can see here that part C1 says that from AQA that the student then investigate the effect of changing the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate on the rate of reaction. And as you can see here, once you say change the concentration, when it's mentioned change the concentration, you now know that we're moving from temperature and we're now looking at changing the concentration. What do you notice? If we change concentration, what's going to happen? But that's not the focus of the question. The question says, state two variables that students need to control. The answers are on the screen. Please make sure you're familiar with that. One thing I would say to students, always be specific when you're talking about variables. Jump down to part 2 of this question, and it says, if you notice here, it also says, from this investigation, the students correctly concluded as the concentration of the sodium thiosulfate solution doubles, the rate of the reaction doubles. Explain the student's conclusion in terms of particles. Again, I'll leave the answer on the screen so you can have the answers for your own reference. But one thing I would say to students, ensure that you are answering the question. Once it mentioned about particles, you know that it has to be some collision. So collision theory will come in. And it says doubling. So concentration increase, the number of particles per volume will increase. Therefore, there will be more successful collision. So once the question points to particles and asks you to explain in terms of the particles, make sure you are talking about collision. Link to collision theory. If there are more particles, there will be more successful collision. If there are more successful collision, the rate of the reaction will go faster, will increase. And in this case, AQA already tell you what happened. It doubles. So make sure you're familiar. Make sure you pause. Check your understanding before you continue. Thanks for watching, and look out for the next video coming shortly.